All right, Dolphins fans, the training camp battle preview videos continue. Today, we are hitting wide receivers. If you missed the first one, we did the position of cornerback. Go back and check that out if you haven't seen it already. But like I said, we are going to be doing one of these for every single position leading up to Dolphins training camp later this month. And just like that video, just like this one, if you've got thoughts on the position, go ahead, drop your thoughts in the comments. And I actually meant to say this in the previous video that I did as well. But now, 2 videos ago, if my math is right, I did a top 5 Miami Dolphins like prove it players. Who needs to step up and prove it in 2023? And I want to start calling out some people that make comments that like go above and beyond, kind of like the commenter of the day. So be like Daniel Meehan, who gave me his 5 Miami Dolphins in that video, literally gave me a write-up about all of them. So, hey, A+ to Daniel. Be like Daniel. Go ahead and give a baller comment. You'll get a shout out on the video as well, as long as I remember. But thank you to all those that comment. But Daniel, you get today's shout out for sure, because about going above and beyond. But let's jump into the wide receivers like I did for the cornerback video. Going to have 3 different pictures that pop up. Guys that are like guaranteed starter spots, guys that are more so in the backup run, and then guys that are more so in that backup battling for a roster spot. And like I said, this is not the Bible. There's a lot of football. There's a lot of practice to be had prior to when we need to make the 53-man roster. So let's jump in right away. And kind of like cornerback, how you had Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey, and you didn't have to say too much about them. That's where we are with Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. They're pretty much set. That's the best duo at wide receiver for my money in the NFL. We don't need to go any further than that. The one thing I will say is I love their versatility in this offense as well. You can line those guys up out on the boundary. You can line them up at slot. You can put them in the backfield. They can go anywhere, and that opens the door, kind of like what we said for cornerback. That opens the door for others to kind of line up in those more traditional spots as well. So let's jump into more about Braxton Berrios and why I like Braxton Berrios in this offense. Because right when they signed him, you know what the first thing that came to my mind was? Special teams. We were terrible at kick return. We were terrible at punt return last year. The ball was kicked, and I was praying for a fair catch every single time. Well, with Braxton Berrios, and to some extent potentially Devon Achane as well, that's not going to be the case. And I know there is the new rule change with the kickoff. We'll see how much of an impact that already has in year 1. But regardless, we shouldn't have to worry about, just throwing Cedrick Wilson back there and having someone that can at least catch the ball. He had 1 memorable return. I think it was in the playoff game against the Bills. Other than that, we didn't have a single memorable kick return or punt return, to my knowledge. Correct me if I'm wrong. Drop it in the comments. The entire season. But Berrios provides that on special teams. Plus, he's fairly, I don't want to say he's overly dynamic, but he can get the job done in the slot as well, especially with these Tyreek Hills, Jaylen Waddles, Devon Achanes, these other guys that can just help spread the field. Let a guy like Berrios work underneath. Should be a match made in heaven for a Mike McDaniel offense. But I'm going to jump to the next one here, more so as like the projected backups, because some of these guys are in that mix to kind of get some of that run for the 3rd wide receiver, because that's one of the biggest battles at this position. I'll say it right now. This position of wide receiver, I mean, it's super top heavy, obviously, with Waddle and Hill. But all right, just one of the best battles that we're going to have in camp because of the unknown at wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4. And then who's going to be those last guys that make the roster? And we'll talk about that more right here, because the name that's on this list that has been getting the most run, the most play so far this offseason with OTAs and with minicamp is Robbie Chosen. This guy, when they signed him, my initial thought, and I'm hoping that I'm wrong, my initial thought was, you know what, this is a kind of a camp body. Give him a shot. Be a veteran in the locker room. You're not going to give up snaps to a guy like Erik Ezukanma, who you're trying to develop, over a guy like Robbie Chosen. Well, with what we've seen from Robbie Chosen so far this offseason, man, they might just say, you know what, we're all in. We're going to win now. Robbie Chosen gives us the best chance to have a feared player on the field. And Ezukanma's game last year, I mean, the skill was there. We saw it in training camp. We saw it in preseason. The dude was making plays, going up and getting balls, running pretty solid routes, creating after the catch. He was doing everything that he was asked to do. Problem is he couldn't get the mental side thing, and the coaches couldn't trust him when it came time to be on the field. So what? He was active for like a game last year. I think he had a catch, maybe. I think that's what the stat was, right? If memory serves me right. So now you got Robbie Chosen, who I thought was kind of a long shot to make the team, and now he's right in the thick of things. And I still think that Erik Ezukanma is still right in the thick of things as well, because what? He was a 4th-round draft pick just 2 years ago, last offseason, I guess I should say. You can't completely rule him out as well, especially with the talent that he has, with the connection that he has with Wes Welker, kind of being one of those guys. We'll talk more about the chances of making the roster here a little bit later. But the other name you got on here is Cedrick Wilson. The guy is due $8 million. So I think, and I've said this a couple of times, I think end of the day, they'd love to trade this guy. It's a fairly deep position. If you can get some return, if you can, more importantly, shed that cap space, that $8 million, and get a little something for Cedrick Wilson in the process, I think that would be the dream scenario. But you can't rule him out because of the money that he's going to be due, and because of he's still a good receiver. He just didn't get a chance really to develop and really project to be what we wanted him to be when we signed him, because we didn't have Tyreek Hill at the time. I'm going to go on to the next and final picture here. So you got guys that made some plays last year in River Cracraft, and you got a guy in Braylon Sanders who was actually active more than Erik Ezukanma. I believe he started the season on the PUP. You got Freddie Swain, or not the PUP, the practice squad. Freddie Swain, who was the same deal kind of as Sanders. And then you got a couple of UDFAs from this year in David Davis and Chris Coleman. But we talk about that slot position and who can get the run there, because we talked about Berrios, and we talked about Ezukanma and Ced Wilson and Chosen Anderson. Well, man, River Cracraft didn't have eye-popping stats, but who could you count on when he was active last year? And who has a relationship with a guy like Mike McDaniel? That's River Cracraft. And who joined Erik Ezukanma as being one of those notable receivers that was making plays consistently last year in training camp and in preseason? It was Erik Ezukanma and Braylon Sanders. So you know the team still wants to invest in those guys as well. And just like I did for cornerback, I went back to see what the Dolphins kept last year, kind of on that initial 53-man roster. They kept 5 wide receivers, not counting those who made the practice squad. So let's say they kind of do a similar thing this year. End of the day, they're probably going to keep 5 or 6. Well, you got Tyreek, you got Waddle, you got Berrios. There's 3. There's probably half, if not more, of the half of the guys that you're keeping. Let's say they can't find a trade partner for Cedrick Wilson. Put him on the list. He's your 4th. Well, then most realistically, of the guys that we have mentioned here and that we see here, you got Erik Ezukanma, you got Robbie Chosen, you got River Cracraft, and you got Braylon Sanders. And like I said, that's not even counting Swain, Davis, Coleman. These are just the more probably in-your-face realistic options at the position, with a lot, like I said, a lot of football to be played here. That is a position battle. That is a battle that is going to be just of the utmost, I don't want to say the utmost importance, but the utmost attention when it comes to these final roster spots. I'm always intrigued by these battles because everyone's on the same team. You're pulling for all of these guys at the end of the day. But man, this is going to be a battle that when these guys get their reps, yeah, they're going to be cheering for each other and everything. But man, they know it's going to be a dogfight for that slot role, for that wide receiver role, for a spot just in general on this team. So this is a position that's going to have a ton of battles outside of those top 2 to 3 guys. But that's where I have got it. That's like a quick preview for the wide receivers. But like I said, thoughts on the position, who you think's going to make the team, any surprises at the position, go ahead, drop them in the comments. Give me some real intel like Daniel did there in that 5 players to prove it video. Get your shout out in the next one. Like I said, I'm going to continue to try to do some more shout outs as well, whether it's on social media, YouTube. Go ahead. If you got a good comment, I'm going to try to my best to at least call out one person per video. But that is what I've got for the wide receivers. We'll be back with another position. And until then time, Dolphins fans, fins up.